Story 1. The graveyard shift at the gas station was a job I took out of necessity, not desire. The pay was meager, the hours were brutal, and the isolation was enough to drive a man to madness. But I needed the money, and so I endured. The gas station sat on a desolate stretch of highway, miles from the nearest town, a forgotten relic of a bygone era. The fluorescent lights buzzed like angry wasps, flickering intermittently, casting long, jagged shadows across the peeling walls. The store inside was small, stocked with stale snacks, lukewarm drinks, and the kind of basic supplies that only the truly desperate would buy. My job was simple: keep the place clean, tend to the occasional customer, and try not to lose my mind in the process. That night, like so many others, was eerily quiet. The clock on the wall ticked away the seconds with a maddening precision, each one stretching into an eternity. The crickets outside chirped in a monotonous rhythm, their song the only sound in the vast emptiness of the night. I sat behind the counter, my eyelids heavy, fighting the pull of sleep. The air was thick with the scent of stale coffee and motor oil, a nauseating combination that did little to keep me alert. Then, at exactly 2 a.m., the lights flickered. It was nothing unusual, they did that all the time, but this time it was different. This time it was accompanied by a sound, a whisper, faint, almost imperceptible, but there. My heart skipped a beat, and I felt a cold sweat break out on the back of my neck. I strained my ears, trying to make sense of it, but the sound was gone as quickly as it had come. I stood up, my legs trembling beneath me, and walked to the window. The parking lot was empty, the pumps deserted. The night was still, the only movement the occasional flutter of a moth against the glass. I told myself it was nothing, just my imagination playing tricks on me. But the chill that ran down my spine told a different story. I returned to my seat, trying to shake off the unease that had settled over me like a shroud. But a few minutes later, the whisper came again. Louder this time, more insistent. It sounded like it was right outside the door. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat echoing in my ears like a drum. I got up again, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps, and walked to the door. The cold night air hit me like a slap as I stepped outside, my eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of life. "Hello," I called out, my voice trembling. There was no answer, only the sound of the wind rustling through the trees. I looked around, my eyes darting from shadow to shadow, but there was nothing, no one. I went back inside, locking the door behind me, and tried to convince myself that it was just the wind, just my mind playing tricks on me. But then the phone rang. The sound was so sudden, so unexpected, that I nearly jumped out of my skin. The phone rarely rang at night, and when it did, it was usually a wrong number or a drunk looking for directions. I picked it up, my hand shaking so badly I could barely hold the receiver. "Hello," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. There was silence on the other end, a silence so profound it felt like a physical presence. And then, faint but unmistakable, I heard it again. The whisper. It was coming through the phone, a low, guttural sound that sent a wave of terror coursing through my veins. I slammed the phone down, my breath coming in ragged gasps, and backed away from the counter. I tried to calm myself, to rationalize what had just happened. Maybe it was a prank, some kids messing around. But deep down, I knew that wasn't it. Something was wrong. Something was very, very wrong. I decided to keep busy, to distract myself from the growing sense of dread that was settling over me. I started stocking the shelves, my hands moving mechanically, my mind racing. But then I heard it again. The bell above the door. Someone had come in. I turned around, my heart in my throat, but the store was empty. The door was closed, the parking lot still deserted. I checked the security cameras, my hands trembling as I rewound the footage. The screen showed the door opening by itself, the bell ringing, but there was no one there. No one at all. A wave of fear washed over me, so intense it felt like I was drowning. I grabbed the phone and dialed my manager's number, my fingers slipping on the buttons. It rang and rang, but there was no answer. I left a message, my voice shaking as I told him what had happened, and hung up. That's when I noticed the book. It was sitting on the counter, small and old, its cover worn and cracked. I hadn't seen it there before, and I certainly hadn't put it there. I picked it up, my hands trembling, and opened it. The pages were yellowed with age, the writing faded and illegible, in a language I didn't recognize. But as I turned the pages, I felt a strange compulsion to keep reading, a pull that I couldn't resist. The lights flickered again, and a cold breeze swept through the store, even though the door was closed. The whispering returned, louder this time, more insistent. It was coming from all around me, from the walls, from the floor, from the very air itself. I dropped the book and stepped back, my hands covering my ears, but the sound was inside my head, a cacophony of voices speaking in a language I couldn't understand but felt in my very soul. They were angry, so angry. I ran to the door, my hands fumbling with the lock, but it wouldn't budge. The whispering was deafening now, a roar that threatened to split my skull in two. I banged on the door, screaming for help, but no one came. No one could hear me. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the whispering stopped. The store was silent, the lights steady, the cold breeze gone. I turned around, my chest heaving, and saw the book lying on the floor, open to a page with a strange symbol drawn on it. A circle with a star inside it, surrounded by writing that seemed to shift and change as I looked at it. I picked up the book, my hands trembling, and stared at the symbol. A strange sense of calm washed over me, the fear replaced by a feeling of peace that I couldn't explain. I closed the book and put it back on the counter, my mind racing. I didn't know what had just happened, but I knew I needed to get out of there. I grabbed my keys and went to the door. This time, it opened easily. I got in my car and drove away from the gas station as fast as I could, my hands gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I didn't look back. When I got home, I called my manager again and told him I was quitting. I couldn't go back to that place. I never found out what caused the strange events that night, and I didn't want to know. All I knew was that I would never work the graveyard shift at a gas station again. But sometimes, in the dead of night, when the world is quiet and the shadows are long, I hear the whisper. And I know, deep down, that it's not over. Not yet. Story 2. The gas station on the edge of town was my sanctuary. It was a quiet place, a relic of a simpler time, where the hum of the fluorescent lights and the occasional ding of the bell above the door were the only interruptions to the stillness. I liked the night shift. It was peaceful, almost meditative. The world outside seemed to fade away, leaving me alone with my thoughts, my books, and the soft glow of the overhead lights. Most nights, the only visitors were the moths that danced around the pumps, their wings catching the light like tiny ghosts. But that night was different. It started like any other. The air was cool, the kind of cool that settles into your bones and makes you pull your jacket a little tighter. The stars were out, sharp and bright against the black velvet of the sky. Inside the store, the hum of the refrigerator and the faint buzz of the lights were the only sounds. I sat behind the counter, a book open in front of me, but my mind kept wandering. There was something in the air, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. Attention, like the moment before a storm breaks. I checked my watch. Almost 2 a.m. I got up to stretch my legs, the linoleum floor cold beneath my sneakers. I walked through the aisles, straightening the chips, checking the drinks, making sure everything was in its place. It was a ritual, something to pass the time. The restroom was at the back of the store, its door slightly ajar. I frowned. I was sure I'd closed it earlier. My heart gave a little jump, but I told myself it was nothing. Just the wind, or maybe I'd forgotten to latch it properly. I pushed the door open and peered inside. The restroom was empty, the fluorescent light flickering faintly. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding and closed the door firmly, making sure it clicked shut. Back at the counter, I tried to shake off the unease that had settled over me. It was just a door, nothing to worry about. But then, at almost 3 a.m., I heard it. A soft thud, like something heavy hitting the floor. My head snapped up, my heart pounding in my chest. The store was silent again, but the sound had been real. I was sure of it. I stood there, frozen, my ears straining for any other noise. The hum of the refrigerator seemed louder now, almost oppressive. I glanced around, my eyes darting from shadow to shadow. Nothing moved, and then the restroom door burst open. A man stumbled out, his face pale and slick with sweat. His eyes were wide, wild, like a cornered animal. He was breathing hard, his chest heaving, and he didn't seem to notice me at all. He just ran, his footsteps slapping against the floor as he bolted for the door. The bell above it jingled as he shoved it open and disappeared into the night. I stood there, my heart hammering, my mind racing. Who was he? How had he gotten in? I hadn't seen anyone come in for hours. The restroom had been empty when I checked. I forced myself to move, my legs trembling as I walked toward the restroom. The door was still swinging slightly, the hinges creaking. I pushed it open, half expecting to find something terrible inside, but it was empty, just the flickering light and the faint smell of bleach. I checked the security cameras, my hands shaking as I rewound the footage. There I was, walking toward the restroom earlier in the night, sitting behind the counter, reading my book. And then, at 2:58 a.m., the restroom door opened, and the man stumbled out. But before that moment, there was nothing. No one had gone in. The restroom had been empty the whole time. I felt a chill crawl up my spine, cold and unrelenting. I called my manager, my voice trembling as I tried to explain what had happened. He sounded half asleep, dismissive. "Lock up and go home," he said. "We'll look at it in the morning." I did as he said, but the drive home was a blur. My mind kept replaying the man's face, the fear in his eyes. It wasn't just fear. It was terror, the kind of terror that comes from seeing something you can't explain. The next day, my manager and I watched the footage together. He frowned, rewinding it again and again, but there was no explanation. No one had gone into the restroom. No one had come out. It was as if the man had appeared out of thin air. We checked the restroom thoroughly, looking for hidden doors, secret passages, anything. But it was just a restroom. For walls, a sink, a toilet. Nothing out of the ordinary. My manager tried to reassure me. "Probably just a prank," he said. "Or maybe you were tired, imagining things." But I knew what I'd seen. The man's fear had been real, and it had left a mark on me. I kept working at the gas station, but the nights were never the same. Every creak of the floor, every flicker of the lights, made my heart race. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, something that didn't belong in this world. The peace I'd once found in the quiet of the night was gone, replaced by a lingering sense of dread. To this day, I still think about that night. I wonder who the man was, what he'd seen, what he'd been running from. And sometimes, late at night, when I'm alone, I feel a cold breeze and hear a faint thud, and I remember the terror in his eyes. I don't know if he was real or something else, something worse. But I do know this. The gas station isn't as quiet as it used to be, and I'm not sure I'll ever feel safe there again.